Reflection by Maureen Ash. I'm an old man now. I made my living as a carpenter. I worked wherever someone would hire me. I learned the trade from my father, a fair but exacting master. He made few extra motions as he sawed and hammered structures into existence. I still use his old plane, and when I place my hands where his held it, it's as if we are working together again, these decades later. The scent of the wood I'm working with takes me back, sometimes, to jobs I did with him. Pine always brings to mind the little barns we built in our town. People needed a place to keep their horse, if they had one, and the carriage or wagon, plus a small loft for the hay. We built the first one for a man named Otto Fernal. He told us what he wanted, and my father drew it with a pencil on the back of a letter we'd received from his uncle. The paper was rough, I remember, and the pencil father had sharpened with his pocket knife quickly became dull. But the little building, with its gambrel roof and neat appearance, was agreeable to Mr. Fernal, and he bought the lumber, all of it pine, for us to build it. After that, there were more requests for us to build similar barns. Even today you can drive, no one seems to walk anymore, and horses no longer pull carriages on our streets, around our town and see these barns, now garages or sheds, behind the homes where our customers lived. People liked them well enough to take care of them. Some have been made into apartments, I have noticed. We built them to be solid, and we put a good roof on them. If their owners keep up the roofs, buildings will last for a long time. We were asked to build houses, but Father liked the simple, sturdy work of putting up a barn. I went on my own and built houses when the barn work was slow, and as he could work less and less, I built more houses and kept us afloat. I was hired to build a house in our town. Father was dead by then, and I should tell you that Mother had died long ago when I was a baby, so I never knew her. Father did not marry again. It was just the two of us. I had school friends whose mothers were kind to me, and I sometimes considered what it would have been like to have a mother, but I felt it was disloyal to my father to dwell on what could not be changed. This house I was hired to build was nothing out of the ordinary. By that time in my career, if you can call a lifetime of building unremarkable barns and houses in small towns around the region a career, I could build a house like that pretty easily. The house is not important. It's just the reason I was in the village in the morning, walking to work across the bridge that spans our town's river. This bridge was built for people to walk back and forth from one side of town to the other, and was not intended for horse traffic when it was first built, or for automobile traffic now. People like this bridge and use it to get to work or to shop. They stop and visit, or they rest their forearms on the railing and look down into the tea-colored water. Two very relaxed men might lean their backs against it, perching their elbows on the railing, and have a morning cigarette as they pass the time before they must be at their desks in an office. I myself had come to think of the bridge as part of my morning routine. The people crossing and talking, the river passing below, the ducks with their nasal quacks as they paddled and tipped suddenly up, revealing their feathered backsides as they fished in the mud for whatever it is that ducks find in the mud. This was how I started my day. I would be mostly alone for the rest of it, a fact that did not bother me in the least, and I would cross the bridge on my way home to my empty house. Sometimes in the evening, there were people on the bridge, and we greeted one another. But it was the morning activity that seemed to buoy me in a way I needed, without knowing why. One morning, I was crossing the bridge in my slow morning way, looking at the faces of my townsfolk and nodding my hellos, when I noticed a woman standing at the railing, looking down at the water. I will tell you now. I have told this story so far as if it were a fairy tale. You believe, as I have led you to believe, that my father and I lived alone without my mother because she simply died, as some people do, before their time. And that my father did not remarry because he missed her so much, or he did not find another woman who could take her place, or he simply did not wish to marry again. I wish I could tell you that the scene on the bridge each morning is a happy one, with people simply enjoying the start of their day, unfettered by fear, which they are not. They are as happy as they are allowed to be. People try, don't they, to enjoy what they can. The young men backed against the railing with their cigarettes are relaxed because they are the only ones who need not pose or pretend. They are there to watch the others, to remember and report. They are like kings among us, though they too have overlords. It is easy for them to be cruel enough to mark and single out someone for some reason, however trumped up, at intervals that please their keepers. This woman on the bridge, looking down at the water, I noticed her that morning not because I had not seen her before. There are not many new faces in our village. We must apply to travel, and application draws attention, which no one wants. I had seen her, an unremarkable woman. I'd passed her many times, I am sure, without noticing, as she would not have noticed me. But this morning she drew my attention because she stood looking down at the water, and at first I thought she was studying her reflection, as I have seen people, especially children, do. But as I watched, I felt more as if she was letting the river study her, that she was showing the river her face. I went to work on the house that day, and for many days after that, each morning crossing the bridge, passing the people, maintaining an expression of calm while passing the young men smoking. And many times I saw the woman at the railing, holding her face for the river to see. And then her shoulders rose and fell. She turned away, went on to her day as she must, passing the young men and everyone else, walking alone. I finished the house I was building and was asked by a member of the party to build one for his family in a neighboring village down the river from ours. It would have been dangerous for me to refuse this sort of request, so I packed a few things and found lodging in that village and began work on the new house. Because this village was also split by the river, the same river, and it also had a bridge between the two halves, people crossed in the morning. The scene was, in fact, very similar to the morning activity in my home village. I welcomed my familiar river in these new surroundings and took comfort that it brought something of my home to me in this new place where I knew no one, and people were reluctant to talk to me, not trusting someone new. How many days was it before I noticed him? I cannot say. There were the same sort of young men leaning on the railing, facing inward toward the people, the better to monitor them, enjoying their smokes. Small knots of people greeted one another and moved carefully, sometimes with measured casualness, past the young kings whose confidence fed on their fear. This man stood alone, never for long, afraid, I am sure, to attract attention, and looked down at the river. He could not keep, I noticed, his intensity out of his face as he searched the water. And then, as if he had found something, after a taut pause in which I read longing, he would stand straight, his breath sometimes catching as he turned to move on, and he joined the current of people moving toward their daily work. What I made of what I saw did not make sense. Could the river carry a reflection, as if it were a leaf or a twig, a corked bottle, tossing, rocking, floating along the surface. It was against all laws of physics. But then again, I have never studied physics, and maybe we don't know all the laws, such as that love has power. I loved the river more for its consistency and kindness. What can a river know of love? And yet we see it flowing, always, a model of duty that carries the sky and much else on its back. Maybe the river, fed with water that has passed through and across our forests, fields, gardens, and yards, knows us well enough to feel our fear, and at the same time, how much we love it. The party will never see the river as more than moving water, sometimes useful, sometimes in the way. And the party fears love enough to make it a crime. My mother was taken from us, and in the woman's dropped shoulders as she sighed and walked away, in the man's careful but intense search of the water's surface, I began to understand why. The party allows what it allows and no more. My parents stepped beyond that. And how do I know that this was the case? I cannot tell you. There is only this, that we who grew up in these circumstances take in through our skin the silent threat over us, the stories told in glances and turned shoulders, the sucking abyss of longing we must fill with tokens and stolen kindness. My father's unspoken love for me was cautiously expressed. His hand on mine as he taught me to hold a tool or brace a wall, this was love as much as he dared. He was as careful in his habits regarding our keepers as he was in walking on rafters while building, and for the same reason. He could not leave me on my own, nor could he lose me. His silence was its own tome, one I learned to read and carry still.